What's going on, guys? And welcome back to the Edison Club podcast. I'm your host, Mike, joined by co hosts tonight, Blake Bowman and Justin Morgan. And we had a lot of positive feedback on a community post that was posted last week, basically asking what everyone wanted to hear as far as topics go on the podcast. And today we're going to take at OLG Chris's advice here, and we're going to talk about how to prepare for a tournament, how to test decks, prepare for matchups, side decking, and just also the mental preparation and trying to deal with the pressure that tournaments will put on you. So, Justin, do you want to kind of go first here and just tell us, how do you prepare for a Yu-Gi-Oh tournament?
Well, honestly, I feel like that the tournaments I've done the best at have taken the least amount of prep. And the reason for that being is there's been often times where I've tested so much that I've seen a lot of like negative results from testing just because the sheer amount of testing that I've done. So, there's been events in the past where like, okay, I grind for 2 weeks on DB or whatever. And you start testing so much, you start getting aggravated, you start seeing like poor results. I don't know if it's from playing so much or you're overthinking the tournament and things like that. And when the tournament comes, you just end up not playing your best. And I find that the tournaments where I don't really prep for, like, I don't say I don't prep, like, I try to take into consideration, like, what is going to be the meta, what decks are going to be played the most, represented the most. Like, for the first Ultimate Time Wizard, I felt like Black Wings and Light Sworns were going to be very popular just because this was a lot of people's first times playing the format IRL. So um, I'll take those things into consideration more so now. But I won't really like sit there and grind and grind and grind and play. Just because I feel like I have a fresh set of eyes on the game if I don't do that, if that makes sense.
Right. Okay.
Like, I
That
think, yeah, and going back to that tournament too, I was testing for a couple weeks ahead of time, right? And there was a big tournament the night before where I played that deck that I was playing at the Time Wizard event, did horrible with it. And I don't know if that's the reason why I got poor results from the Time Wizard, if I was just burnt out from playing and my mind wasn't all the way there.
right.
Whereas, these recent Switch tournaments I've been going to, I really haven't tested per se so much really prep for the event. I just go in there and I take what I've learned from the past events, and I've done pretty well with that. So
Okay. I see. I see. Okay. Well, I guess I'll kind of go next. Blake said he's going to be a little bit long-winded with his response, so we'll let him go last.
Go
Uh,
ahead.
my basically how I prepare for a tournament is obviously we know in a pretty far in advance, this is coming. So I'll try to like think about what people are going to be playing, look at the meta. Are there any, oddities that people are playing? Are people back on like Legacy of Yada and Black Wings? Try to build my deck for the meta. And most of the time it doesn't really change, like for me, because I always play Christia Sworn, that most of the time I try to respect Black Wings the most. It's the worst matchup for the deck. Um, if it's going to be like a smaller tournament, more like a local size where I'm more familiar with the decks that people are playing, then sometimes I'll make modifications, for like the local meta. But just generally speaking, try to always prep for the best deck and know the lists, the builds that most of the better players are playing. And I try to concrete my deck list at least a week before the event if I can, and just stick to it. I always tell people that I rarely play like days leading up to the tournament. And if I do play, I just generally don't play the deck I'm going to be playing in the big tournament, because if I have a stretch of bad luck in testing or even just funsies, that can really affect my mental game going into a big event. So I try to just build confidently and concrete the list very early, know my side decking patterns, what are my favorable matchups, what are my non-favorable matchups, everything like that, and just try to have confidence in my own ability leading up to that kind of tournament like that. So and then it's like the mental kind of game. leading up to that is just like I try to just do little things like drink a lot of water and stay very hydrated the days leading up to the event. Even during the event, I always have a water jug with me and keep my head in a good headspace and focus on um, the games that I played leading up to that. Think about my wins, think about my losses, and above all else, like I just try not to misplay. I just play the hand I'm dealt, try to make the best of it throughout the tournament run. And you're gonna have games throughout a tournament run where maybe you get god handed by somebody, or your deck just doesn't work the way it does, and or it doesn't work the way it's supposed to, and you can't really take that to heart because Yu-Gi-Oh is a game of variance, even with the decks that are consistent. So you just kind of have to roll with the punches and keep your head held high and just keep going through the tournament. So that's kind of my tournament prep and kind of how I try to keep my headspace throughout the day.
Hmm. All right, time to hit you guys with the manifesto, the
Okay.
thesis
All right.
paper here. So I think I agree with some of what you guys are saying, and maybe might even have a bit of disagreement as well, or at least like an asterisk beside some things that you're saying. Um, I'll provide some like prolegomena, things that need to be said before I say what I really want to say first, and just state that I think the most important thing up front is to decide your goals for the tournament. Um, if your goal is to win a large scale event, I think that it requires an incredible amount of work, at least at some point. And I'll clarify that in just a moment. I think that the number of people who show up at a large scale event and have a realistic shot at winning is a very small percentage of people who enter, even good players. There's a certain level of preparation that I think is necessary. And the truth is, there is a bit of luck on the day. That's why the absolute best players don't win every single time, um, because it is a game of variance, a game of chance. And so, on rare occasion, you might have a winner of a large scale event who maybe didn't deserve to, but it was simply their day. But I
The
think by and
BBG
large,
5K. Cough, cough.
shots fired. I don't know the guy, so I won't fire them alongside you. But um, yeah, I think that most of the time, extreme prep is necessary to win an event. You can top an event, and I think and do well, but just by the time you play through a top cut, you're looking at sometimes like 12, 13, 14 rounds, depending on how deep the tournament goes. So just saying that to say, I think it's important to set your goals. Like if you want to win or you're playing to have fun. And I'll also clarify to say too that we're specifically talking about Edison format, a closed format. I actually do think that in advanced, it is important to constantly be grinding because the game is constantly changing. However, in Edison, a closed format, I think that it is possible to at some point put in the time, grind out the matchups, learn how your deck interacts with other decks. And once you have put in that time, then you don't have to. I don't think you have to grind before every tournament. And there are certain pitfalls that come with grinding that Justin alluded to. One that he didn't mention that I think a lot of people fall prey to is your testing circles, especially if you test with the same people. You end up making reads about what your playtest partners do rather than what the deck generally does. And so they might have certain tendencies, and you play according to those tendencies that may not reflect what the community at large is going to do when they're playing Black Wings. Like I had a play test partner for a big event a while back, and I thought he was kind of setting traps kind of randomly, like uh, traps that didn't make a lot of sense in my opinion for that game state. But he was really just trying to mind game me. We had tested so much that we were to that point where it was just extreme mind game levels. When in general, that's not how you want to play. You want to go for the most likely, the most optimal, the most typical play, and make percentage based reads. Okay, with all of that said, uh, so much goes into preparation. I mean, you're talking about deck building, you're talking about learning matchups, you're talking about building side, screens and side patterns. I think that at the very least, if you want to do well in an event in Edison, you need to learn the main matchups. You need to learn the main matchups. So you would need to understand how your deck is going to play well against Black Wings, how to play against Vayu, how to play against Frog variants, how to play against Hero Beat variants, and maybe even Diva Hero as well. Probably need to throw in at this point Dragon Turbo into the mix. And then on top of that, if your deck has some obvious niche matchups that are difficult for you, maybe a Frog variant with Gladiator Beasts, same could be said with Dragon Turbo, not just Gladiator Beasts, but something as strange as like X Sabers. You probably ought to be familiar with those. And then beyond learning how to play your specific matchups well, when to and I'm talking like holding cards, playing cards. Like it's important to know that Enemy Controller and Soul Exchange are some of your most powerful cards in the Gladiator Beast matchup. Like you need to make those cards count in that matchup. You just need to know these sort of things. Beyond all of that, you need to have a side strategy specifically for these core matchups. I can't tell you how valuable it is to go between games and to not sweat it. Like you know exactly what you're going to do. You're siding immediately, and there is a real pressure that you place upon your opponent by you being ready and you just staring them down. You presenting your deck for cut, and you just look at them. You just keep looking at them, and maybe you make a comment like, "Hey, man, just a heads up, we got this much time left in round." They start playing rushed, and you're not rushed at all. You're familiar with these matchups. You're familiar with the core matchups. You sided in 30 seconds. You're in a healthy state of mind. That for me goes a long way in my mental. There's a billion more things we could say when we talk about deck prep. Um, Meta nuances, maybe like what you were mentioning, Michael. Our Black Wings on Yada. Um, you know, uh, what deck most recently topped? How heavily do I need to prepare for Dragon Turbo? How many am I going to see? Will I see it at all? Those are kind of nuanced questions, but I think that if you're very well prepared in Edison for the 4 core matchups, and I'm throwing Dragon Turbo in there as well now, so 5, and you have sided strategies for those, and at some point in your Edison career, so to speak, you've grinded out all of those matchups and you're extremely familiar with them, you have a chance of doing well at an event. So, anyways, I'll punt it back to you guys. Anything you want to add? Debate,
Something I want to add on the topic of playtesting that I feel like a lot of times players get wrong is that when you're playtesting with your friend or your testing partner, whoever, you should be playing to test, not necessarily playing to win. So like maybe you play hands revealed, or maybe you play like, take backsies or allowed. If it's like just a very obvious, misplay, because like sometimes you'll just miss things, and like me, like if I'm playing Black Wings, a deck that I'm not super familiar with piloting, maybe I'll miss something that like a really good Black Wing player, would never miss. So like if you win just because I forgot that, it's probably not going to be the same when you play against a Black Wing player with a higher skill level. So like make sure that you're testing to test and not necessarily testing to win.
Yep, that's true. And sometimes you need kind of going against a little bit Justin's point, but I also want to clarify Justin's point. Justin has grinded the game into the ground. Like he has played hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Edison games, and with multiple decks, and seen it from multiple angles. And he's a judge. He knows all the rulings, and so for him, maybe playing a bunch of games can be this exercise in psychological warfare more than anything else. It's not that he's learning the matchups or card interactions or which cards to hold or what are the power points and the tipping points in the matchup, when what does the game hinge upon, etc. Maybe he doesn't need to learn those things. But for me, as someone who just started Edison this past year, and honestly, for the first half of the year, didn't really play too intensely. I would just show up in an event on the day, put something together, and go 500 pretty much every event for like the first 6 months. It wasn't until I grinded out tons and tons of matches in certain matchups that I begin to see trends, patterns, expectations, like how many cards do I really need to side for this matchup? Do I overside for this matchup? Um, does my deck have inherent ways of dealing with this if I, tweak it, build it a certain way? That really did require like lots and lots and lots of grinding. And like you're saying, Michael, grinding to learn rather than grinding to win. And that's why something like ranked may not be um, like ranked Edison ladder, as fun as that can be, and while that might teach you like interactions and matchups that you wouldn't normally see, rogue stuff, I don't know that it's going to teach you like deck building, and it's probably not going to teach you like inform you very well for like your side strategy, those sort of things.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely agree with that. I played some ladder yesterday, just to test out a few different decks that I haven't necessarily played a lot. And sometimes on ladder, like especially when you're first starting, like you just play against like randos on weird decks and they don't know the rulings. And like for me, like if I ever get into a ruling dispute, I just immediately leave the game. Like I'm just not it's not worth it to me to send like, the links and the rulings. I'm just like, I'll just back out. Hopefully play against someone else. Um, so I get my patience on ladder is like very thin for stuff like that. So I definitely like when it comes to testing, I'd much rather test with like the team or just people that I know.
Yeah. Justin, what do you got to say, man?
Justin's
Yeah,
asleep.
I no. I think that and also like I got to thinking when you was talking to dual book is a big factor too. I think that the dual book community and like the online community versus the IRL community are two very different communities. And sometimes those very good online players don't translate to IRL tournaments very well. We've seen this before in person, right? And I think that the meta we see online versus the meta that we see in person necessarily doesn't isn't the same either. And so often I find that playing online with the dual book algorithm, which is notoriously bad, we all know that, sometimes doesn't benefit my in-person experience. And what's helped me grow as a player this past year isn't me playing online, it's me going to event after event after event. Every weekend, every other weekend, going to events. Um, that is what's helped me become a better player just this past year. So the fact that we don't really have a locals that does Edison, like week in and week out, and I think that sort of can hurt somebody too that is new to the format. I know that's a little bit off topic right there, but
Yeah, someone
Yeah.
else actually commented on that same post and asked like, what are the major differences between IRL play versus online play? I mean, we can lightly touch on that as well if you guys want to.
Yeah, I think it's two things. One, Justin pretty much just stated the algorithm. I actually think here's a different take. I think that the algorithm is actually fine. It's a truly randomized instance based on some things that I think maybe people have figured out at this point, some ways that they're trying to manipulate the algorithm. But even said, like it's probably more random actually than just shuffling your cards manually. And here's why I say this. Game two, you're sorting through your deck and you see, oh, I have three Raikos in a row. Like you split those things up. I mean, yeah, you shuffle your deck for like a full minute straight afterwards, but the probability that you see three Raikos in a row again, it's not likely at all, right? And so there's this human factor that there isn't a level of manipulation. I don't think anyone would even call this like any form of cheating, any soft cheating, but people are looking through their deck and they're siding. And if they see that their deck is stacked against them, in a way that doesn't make sense, then they just shuffle those cards. Like they just shuffle them as they're siding, and then they shuffle a bunch more and they present it to be shuffled. But it's unlikely that they're going to see these really odd DB type hands where sometimes you can just see, the same algorithm on repeat where you draw the three Raikos 3 games in a row. It's something ridiculous that you would never see in person. So that's one thing. But even bigger than that, some people are naturally very good socially, and they're very good at making reads based off of body language, and they're very good at leading their opponent to make certain plays off of body language. And that is a skill that cannot be cultivated online, at least not to the same extent. You can type and you can do thinking emojis, but it's not the same. It's not the same at all. And that's a real factor in IRL play.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, I feel like online is more difficult for me personally. It's just very difficult for me to like, I don't know, click on the things and like, I can't like look at everything all at one time. Like they were talking about this on Beast Mode stream last night. Someone had pointed out like how hard it is to like resolve Beckoning Light and Christia Sworn on Dueling Book, because in real life you can like spread your graveyard out, spread your hand out, and like just swap them, one at a time. But on Dueling Book, it's like, oh, I have to pitch my whole hand and then sit here and like look at my board, look at my hand, look at my graveyard, figure out what I need to get back and everything like that. So I think that's a reason why too. For me personally, I think Dueling Book is more difficult to play on.
And another thing too, it's like you can't go to an IRL tournament and someone gets mad. I guess you could, but it doesn't happen. Someone gets mad they're losing and picks up their cards mid game and leaves. And
yeah, they hit the pause button.
and then call you curse words in Italian. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like that happens a lot on Dueling Book, to where like, okay, well, I'm playing really well. Honestly, this play goes through, and then all of a sudden your opponent just calls your names and quits. It's like, wow.
Yeah.
Sometimes it just ruins your experience.
Yeah, like I said, most of the time, I would say 99% of the time, if I'm playing against somebody and they're just like I remember specifically playing against a guy one time that told me that if he Shura Kalutes over my Dupe Frog, my Dupe Frog doesn't get the effect. And I just left the game. I was like, it's not even worth it. I'll just go play against someone else.
But it does not get.
Yeah, it does. It does. It does get the effect. Yeah, it doesn't miss timing.
I'm joking.
I was about to be like, we need to get a new judge.
I've heard Justin troll you enough that there was no moment in which I took that bait. Yeah. Dude, I actually think that one of the hardest things with preparation, and this is a skill all in and of itself, is healthy deck building. I don't know if that's something you guys want to address. Like,
yeah,
I'm sure. Yeah. I think I've seen, Michael, you've made videos about deck building, but
yeah, deck building and accountability. Yeah, deck building and accountability go a long way. I can tell you from experience, a year ago, if I played a deck like Dragon Turbo and I brick one game, I'm just like, this deck hates me. This deck isn't good. People cheat. People draw extra cards when you're not looking, kind of thing. In reality, it was just like, I either didn't have the most optimal build or I was just an idiot and I just didn't know how to play the deck. And I refused to blame myself for my deck's issues when it was 100% my fault.
Yep. Justin, how do you go about building a deck?
For Edison format, I mean, it's pretty much solved and cut and dry, and I typically stick with what is proven, right? I don't deviate away from what works, and I feel like doing so, going to a big tournament, is not going to yield good results. It's like, ooh, let me take out Icarus Attack out of Black Wings and put in, triple compulses or something like that, right? Like, I don't change what's proven. And in Edison format, a lot of the best decks are already proven, and there's not many choices you can make that are going to make the deck any better. Now, when it comes to advanced format, I feel like that's where you have a lot more room for side deck options, tech choices that maybe somebody hasn't caught on yet, just because the card pool is so much bigger, right? And the formats aren't as old. But for Edison's sake, when it comes to building a deck, I think it goes back to a sort of what Boyd says. It depends on the event you're going to. If it's a Switch tournament that we go to, we pretty much know what everybody plays. And you can add in those tech choices into the main deck or whatever it may be to better prep you for that tournament. If it's something like, let's say, the Ultimate Time Wizard coming up, I think it's best to stick with what's proven and what's proven to work, because a lot of people are going to take the best decks of the format. They're not going to take their gimmicky decks to a big tournament that is going to have a big prize like the Ultimate Time Wizard. So when it comes to past formats, I think stick with what is proven. And then it just comes down to who the better player is, right? And of course, luck. You can't count out luck, but it comes down to who the better player is. So that's my take on it.
I'm always trying to like push a deck to its limits. Like Blake had to full on talk me out of playing Ultimate Offering in Christia Sworn for the 5K. We talked about it for days, and I was like, I'm going to play Ultimate Offering because Ultimate Offering Celestia is kind of broken. But I was always trying to like, find the new, like the new hot toy to play with in the deck, even if it does kind of go against the grain. I guess that's like just like two different ways of thinking, though.
Yep.
Yeah, for me, deck building is the most fun part of Yu-Gi-Oh! I enjoy it more than playing, and I think I'm better at deck building than I am at playing. I'm kind of, I'm an analytical kind of personality, and I do think that's my strength, and so I'm not afraid to deviate from what is normative. Um, Anytime, like I guess I haven't played in that many like really big events, like ever in Yu-Gi-Oh! Because I haven't played that long. Um, but every time I did, I made some sort of unique meta call that I think worked out for me every time. Even in this past 5K, um, which was really the last time I guess I played Yu-Gi-Oh. um, I mained 2 DD Crow in Black Wings, which I thought was a good call. I also sided a mind control package with a Raikou for Black Wings. I had I sided a Raikou with my theory being that it was an out to Consecrated and Royal Decree. No one was really doing either of those things. Someone had sided or mained 3D Crows like a year ago, but no one was really playing them. So those were all kind of risks, but I think that they were right choices. Um, I think that unless you kind of have proven to yourself that you kind of have a healthy mind for analytical reads and right deck building strategy, then it probably is best to just copy and paste your deck off of format library or something. But for me, that's what's fun. I really enjoy that.
I think adding DD Crows to the main deck isn't like really reinventing the wheel or breaking the meta. And that's because DD Crow is proven to be a great card, right? And it's just choosing whether or not you're going to main deck it or side deck it. It's either going to be in one of the two decks, and it goes back to what do you think is going to be played most? Like, it's very good against Frogs. It's very good against Value Turbo. And I wouldn't say that is not sticking to the proven because it is. You're playing cards that have proven to be effective in the format. So I don't think that's deviating away from the norm.
Yeah, though I think Edison is so refined that that's about as much deviation as we get.
Yeah, exactly.
That is kind of like, whoa, night out on the town, party hardy. Like it is kind of crazy. I main decked a breaker, which was the one card that I changed in the main. But that was like super crazy. Like, why would you main deck a breaker and Black Wings? You know, but
Which
yeah,
I was glad
I
to see
hear what you're
that,
saying.
honestly. Like, Blackwing decks are almost always like 35 of the exact same cards. And then, like, some people play D Prison, some people play Legacy of Yada, or every now and again, people play like Upstart or something. But I was glad to see something a little bit different. And those random times when you get to Icarus attack away a DD Crow. That's kind of funny as well.
Yeah, I actually stand by. I mean, unless the meta dramatically shifts, I think that Crow over at least the second Vayu is a good choice. I played one Vayu, but either ways, we're getting down into the minutia of deck building. I think that in general, your principle's right. Like, stick with what is proven, and I think deck building also is kind of, you can't really do it well unless you have grinded out a deck like crazy and really understand matchups. It's really hard to build well unless you have played your deck against a lot of different things for a long time.
Yeah, I mentioned in a lot of the videos I've made about testing too. It's like you can't play 2 matches and really have like that much information gained. Because like if I play Morphtronics, right, in 2 matches and somehow manage to beat Blackwings, right? Let's just say that they bricked in game 3 and I beat them. Then like my win rate against Blackwings is 100% with Morphtronics, and that's just not true. So like the more games that you can play, the more information that you can gather from the games that you played, and especially if those games are on Dueling Book, because you have the resource of the replay button, which can really help a lot. Like it helps you understand like, why did I win? Why did I lose? Did I win this game because I got lucky? Did I win this game because I made a good read, or did they just brick, or anything like that? I think is really valuable.
Yeah. And sometimes things aren't always intuitive. I feel like I really cracked Edison back in November when I went on this big grind spree with a friend, and I had already decided to play Blackwings, and we played a lot of mirror matches, which people flame Blackwings. I know that Carpath is like notorious for saying how simple the deck is. I actually pretty strongly disagree with that. I think that the mirror match can be pretty complex too, that you have to do things that don't typically make a lot of sense. It's not how you would normally play Yu-Gi-Oh! But I didn't start seeing that until I played like 100 games. To where if you're going, we realized that going second in that matchup is so unbelievably uphill. Like maybe, in my opinion, like 60-40, which I think is pretty extreme for Edison. Probably higher than that, actually. At least our win rates corresponded to that. Little things like sometimes you actually have to just tank a lot of damage to the face, because if you only have one solid normal summon, even if it's a whirlwind hand, all they have to have is a bottomless, and you lose the game. Like the game is just actually over. The ability to set a trap first in that matchup is so important. They have the tempo for Icarus plays as well over you, and there's just a lot of things that make going second very difficult. So you do things like you set strong monsters, you set like a Shiro for Icarus food, weird things like that. Or you just tank damage to the face until you can trade out a monster to play around Icarus or play around Bottomless or whatever. Um, and it may look silly too. Sometimes you'll lose games where you feel like you lose the game with 5 cards in your hand or 4 cards in your hand or something, and you just got blown out. But that's kind of how you have to play the matchup. You can't know that unless you've grinded it out.
Yeah, the Blackwing mirror matches I've watched always are just like they are very, very strange, and then you're scared to leave like multiple names on the field because of stuff like Sirocco too.
Yep.
Yeah.
Dude, here one thing I know that probably starting to land the plane with podcast time, but something that has been super beneficial to me is really feeling comfortable with my side deck. What do you guys think there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, let me give you, I've said this on here several times, but like when you have your side deck built correctly, right? And you've got like X number of cards for Blackwings, X number for heroes, frogs, so forth and so forth. This is something that people ask me very often is like, let's say you play against a deck like, I don't know, Evil Hero Rocks or like Morphtronics or just like weird matchups, right? Like you didn't prep for X Sabers. Like, how do you side in that matchup? And basically what I've come to figure out is like, before I even look at my side deck, I'll go through my main and decide like, okay, this card's really not good here. This card's definitely not good. This card could be better. And, pull out whatever is 100%, it's not good there. It's not going to go with your strategy. It doesn't do well into the matchup. And then look through your side deck and say like, okay, well, I can put this in here because at least this is going to be less dead than this. Like if your opponent never played a single trap card, they're not on traps, like a card like Book of Moon is going to do more than Heavy Storm in that matchup. So I think it's important to definitely have your side deck catered for the matchups that you know you're going to play against, or if your deck has a very bad matchup against something, make sure that you respect that, but also just know how to side deck properly and everything like that. I think that's really important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think when it comes to side decking, like you have to realize that you're playing with your side deck more than you are your main deck.
Yeah.
To an extent, like, right, you're playing either side deck games 2 and 3. So those deck building choices come in a lot more when it comes to building your side deck as opposed to your main deck.
Yeah, and sometimes it can help you too. Like, I know for me playing Christia, and I think a lot of times for Frog players, it's kind of the same way. Is like sometimes it can be so important to win game one because games 2 and 3, especially if you're on Frogs, it's like your Blackwing and Vayu opponents get to put in deck dev and DD Crow and stuff like that as well. So it's important to also know like counter side, like what's my opponent going to put in to try to slow me down.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that again, some things aren't going to be super clear off the bat as to what you ought to side out. Like even when you're like you're talking about, and I think you're right. This is exactly how you start building your side out. For me, I would go to the 4 main matchups again, now 5 main matchups, and I would ask, okay, let me just build an entire side deck based around these cards. And I'll start at like 18, 19 cards on my side and start to shave it down. But you start out by saying, okay, what cards can I even afford to take out? But sometimes it's not super clear what you take out. Like um, some matchups, I take out Dust Shoot going first or second, depending on the matchup. You know,
Yeah, like Dust Shoot against like Gladiator Beasts, not super great,
yeah.
right? Like,
or sometimes too, like you'll find that you have so many cards to side because cards are just generally good against that deck, like Frogs, for example, that you might want to trade out cards that you wouldn't normally trade out. Like Justin, you said you were talking about DD Crow earlier, and you're like, "Oh, DD Crow is good against Frogs. That's proven." I actually side my Crows out in my Blackwing build against Frogs because I have better cards to side in. And so, but again, I didn't know that, or I didn't come to that conclusion without a lot of grinding. So again, you don't have to grind before every single tournament, but I do think at some point you need to have grinded a ton versus certain matchups to draw very concrete conclusions, especially things that aren't initially very intuitive. Um, so, yeah, but it feels great if you have a clean side deck and you know your ratios and you're not thinking through, you're not debating in your head in between games. All right, man, what do I want to take out? And you're also not emotionally. Here's a big thing: you're not emotionally reacting to what happened in the game before. This results based analysis, like, oh man, that guy just absolutely wrecked me with Heavy Storm, so I'm siding in Starlight Road against a deck that I shouldn't side Starlight Road in. You
yeah,
know,
yeah,
that sort of
100%.
thing. Stick to your prep time. Like you have way more games played in prep than you have this single game beforehand. Trust your prep time.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that 100% too. So we'll try to keep this less than an hour. I do want to talk a little bit about like the mental game. We kind of lightly touched on that earlier. If you go into the tournament, you know, and you've put in the time and you know your side deck guide, you know your deck, you know the matchups, then that's like the biggest part of the battle right there. And from there, it's like, you know, like I said earlier, keeping yourself in a good headspace. Like for me, after every round, I go to the bathroom, and I actually got this from Blake. I go to the bathroom and I wash my hands like really well with like really hot water, you know, and I used to like kind of walk around and scout like every round. And now I'll just do that like once or twice throughout the day. I actually kind of just go somewhere, sit down, like clear my head, especially if I lost, and just get myself back into like the correct headspace to be able to like carry out the rest of the day and play at the level that you need to be playing in. And for me, something I struggled with for a long time was confidence. So like I would walk into a tournament and see like, you know, these guys that are obviously very good players and be like, oh, well, you know, this is already over. You know, I don't have a shot. This isn't good. I had no confidence. It's like the more confidence that you have in yourself, it also really goes a long way as well. Cause like now when I go to a tournament, I'm just like, I don't care who's here. Like I can beat anybody in the whole room, you know, just like the same way that they can beat me. And I think that that has helped me a lot personally, is just not like sitting across the table from somebody and just feeling like I lost before I even like put my deck on the table.
Yep. Yep. I as you mentioned, I'm a big fan of the hand washing thing. When you get
Yep.
nervous, your hands can get cold, extremities kind of get cold. And so I'll just slowly wash my hands under cold water, or I'm sorry, warm water. And then I'll even do like some breathing exercises. Like I just close my eyes, breathe out of my nose, just try to like lower my heart rate. And I don't know, stay focused, stay focused. Try not to get
Yeah.
like too
Yep.
emotionally hot in one way or the other, like despairing or excited.
Yeah, and if you can play some games before your tournament to warm up, not necessarily like with the deck you're going to be playing that day, maybe you play against your friend in like a Tengu format match, or you play like your quick draw deck for fun, just to kind of get like the nervous jitters gone, is something I've started doing sometimes that kind of helps me as well.
Yep. Yeah. I think again too, like to whomever is listening to this, I would stress again that the overwhelming majority of people, the moment that they sign up for the tournament and to pay their entry fee, they've pretty much given their money away. Like they're
Yeah.
paying for the experience. Like it's a very small percentage of people that I think are have any real probable chance of winning. Because I do think that preparation to win a major event requires extreme dedication. Like again, at some point, you needed to have grinded out hundreds of matches in an intentional way, not just like haphazardly playing the game, because you can have bad practice that doesn't really make you any better. Um, and everything from side strategies to having that IRL skill set to make appropriate reads based off of body language. There are a lot of things that go into winning a tournament, and on top of it all, you have to get pretty lucky. And so, um, for it to be your day and to have neglected other areas of prep, I think you have to be like really lucky on the day, which happens. But I think that those examples are few and far between. So I think most tournaments, if you haven't done those things, if you feel like you have not committed that time, you don't have some sort of like robust side strategy, you aren't super comfortable with the matchups, then you should probably very intentionally change your mindset and just play to have fun or play to learn something about your deck. I mean, some of the best play testing you can have is actually tournament play testing, and
Yeah.
set some goals for yourself apart from winning, you know?
I think that when it comes to like playing past formats, the best prepping you can do is not necessarily prepping for one event in itself, but going to event after event after event as often as you can. So when those do big events pop up, you have already sort of prepped yourself for these decks. Um, I think like when it comes to physical preparation, getting sleep, getting a shower, eating and things like that, drinking a lot of water helps out a lot too. I can't count how many times I've went to a regional or a YCS and driven 3, 4 hours beforehand, knowing I have to drive back home, and just that looming feeling of having to stay awake for 10 or 11 more hours just makes me play worse. And at the end of the day, you wasted your whole day for nothing, right? So I think that getting there the day beforehand is very important. If it's far away, getting enough sleep and rest. But yeah, going to as many events as possible. I think if it wasn't for me going to as many events as I had in the past year, I couldn't confidently say that like I can now. That like when I go into Raleigh next year or next month, I feel like I can tell myself that like I am better than 65 to 70% of the people in here, and I feel like I can back that up. I feel like anybody on our team can say that and back it up, and it's not because of a like a ego or a complex or anything like that. It's just because we've all put in the work to be where we are.
Yeah. Who hasn't gone to a nationals like your first nats, right? You eat breakfast, maybe like you guys are trying to get to the venue early or you're running behind or something. You eat quickly, and you didn't realize that you doing well was going to mean that you didn't eat again for like the next 12 hours.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that's happened to
Yeah.
me before, and that was miserable, just not knowing these things ahead of time and prepping physically accordingly.
Yeah. Let me tell you, I am the biggest influencer when it comes to water. If you are not drinking water throughout the day, you have to change your whole game plan, because when I used to go to events when I was younger, I would get headaches, I'd feel miserable halfway through the day, and I'm just like, oh, these things make me tired, blah, 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 take a lot out of me. When in reality, I was just freaking dehydrated. I lived in a constant state of dehydration. And Yu-Gi-Oh tournaments, like Blake said, I mean, you're going to eat breakfast, and that's probably going to be it, until 9, 10 o'clock that night, unless there's a food vendor on site. And you can only buy food from those if you like get a second mortgage on your house, because the food is so expensive. So like water 100% above all else. But like if you can bring like fruit snacks or fruit or whatever you can bring just to kind of have a quick snack throughout the day, that really helps a lot as well.
Yeah, and Konami events, I mean, again, I had a long hiatus, so this could be different now, but I mean, it was normative to not have a lunch break at
Oh yeah.
Konami sanctioned events. And so even if you do have the money, even if you're just like you live on a bed of Benjamins, you still have to win very quickly or lose very quickly to go and get food and eat between rounds. You got to make that happen like in the spare time after your match is over, before time is called and extra time is given, and run through all of that. So
on top of like having to go to the bathroom or anything else that you have to do after the round, so it can definitely be difficult. And like on the weekends that you play Yu-Gi-Oh, especially if it's like a 2-day event like a YCS, it can be very easy to like just not drink, not really eat well, because like we don't eat well when we go to these things. Like we're eating fast food, we're eating venue food, which is like French fries and chicken nuggets and cheeseburgers that were like warmed up in a microwave. So anything that you can eat that's like somewhat better for you is going to help you a lot too.
Yep.
I think more importantly, going to an event, or not more importantly, but just as important, is going to an event with people that you're going to enjoy being around, that you're going to have fun with, and that's going to like bring your spirits up too. Because like going to an event by yourself just isn't fun. Going to an event with somebody you barely know, most of the time it's fun. Jacob was very fun to hang out with, but
yes, yeah,
friends. I can't count how many times that if I were to base a tournament experience solely on the tournament itself, 80% would be bad, right? But going with the group that you enjoy hanging out with, that's where the fun of the game comes from, I think. So
yeah,
I think pick some people you're going to have fun with and make it a group trip.
Yeah. And I'll say one more thing too, before we get out of here, as far as like just basic tournament prep and stuff, is reach out, talk to, and like just watch content from the other creators. I have basically all the big name channels in my descriptions below. And there are a lot of those videos that are just free coaching sessions. So like just go to their channels, go to like Hydro Pump's channel, True Heroes channel, Fraser's channel, and just check them out, watch them play, listen to what they have to say, because that can really take you a long way too. Especially if you're not getting to put in like quite as much testing as you really need to. Sometimes just knowing like how to like properly side from a video that you watched, or just general deck building theory, can take you a long way as well.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Any closing statements before we get out of here? Anything you guys would like to say?
Guys. You should share your success story after you listen to Michael's podcast, and applied some of the things that he or Justin or I have said, and then you go and like thrash a tournament, even if it's just a local. You should shoot Michael a message and
yes,
just share your success story.
Absolutely, please. I would be thrilled to know that anything that was said on any of the content that I post, but especially like something like this, that it helped someone improve or get a little bit further than they had been. So that would really mean a lot to me, definitely. Okay. All right. Well, I guess that's about it for this episode, guys. So this is Mike, Blake, and Justin from the Edison Club signing out until the next one.